For 1,000 years, the galaxy knew peace. Trade routes spanned hundreds of systems, cultures blended, and wars became ancient myths told to children who could barely imagine bloodshed. Treaties were signed, councils formed, and alliances woven tighter than the gravitational pull of dying stars. Across this vast web of life, humans were the unpredictable variable, welcomed for their creativity, distrusted for their volatility, but respected for their history of surviving the impossible. They had not always been easy allies, but when the 1,000-year treaty was inked, humanity stood among the stars as equal architects of the Age of Calm. The Galactic Council was a marvel of architecture and diplomacy alike, an eternal meeting of minds drawn from every edge of known space. Inside the towering dome, representatives from 1,000 species debated laws, shared technology, and governed the fates of billions. Voices rose and fell in countless languages, shimmering through translation matrices that strove to keep pace with the sprawling flood of ideas. Aliens of every imaginable form, scales, feathers, silicon shells, sat shoulder to shoulder with human delegates in uniforms that were ceremonial, dignified, and adorned with the sigils of peace they had sworn to uphold. But beneath the silver surface of civility, cracks had long been forming. Even as the Council patted itself on the back for a millennium without war, old instincts festered. Greed for new worlds, resentment over perceived slights, ancient blood feuds never truly forgotten, these simmered in dark corners where the light of diplomacy could not reach. Whispers of rebellion stirred from the unexplored sectors of space, carried by trembling traders and intercepted communications that spoke of growing fleets, secret armies, and ideologies that scorned the Council's softness. The Zorvani Dominion was not a name on any official ledger. It was a curse spoken in fear, a conspiracy laughed off by optimists clinging to the illusion of eternal peace. A reptilian race born from the crushing gravity of a dying world, the Zorvani had evolved with war encoded into their blood. Where others built civilizations of philosophy, art, and technology, the Zorvani built armories, fortified planets, and breeding grounds for armies that knew no peace. They had signed no treaties. They had pledged loyalty to no council. For 1,000 years they had prepared. Humanity knew. Not everything, not every detail, but they understood the nature of time better than most. 1,000 years was an instant in the life of a star, but an eternity for those who had never truly abandoned the instincts of survival. Humans had lived through dark ages, plagues, world wars, environmental collapses, near-extinction events. They knew peace was not the default state of existence. It was the rare, fragile exception carved out by vigilance and iron will. So while the Council sang songs of unity, humanity quietly sharpened its blades. When the Zorvani made their move, they did so with brutal precision. Warships blacked out the stars over frontier colonies. Messages of defiance burned through comms network. Council stations were seized, delegates slaughtered. Entire species were given ultimatums: kneel or be annihilated. And finally they came to the heart of the galaxy, the Council chamber itself. The doors of the chamber exploded inward under kinetic bombardment. Shards of shimmering crystal and alloy rained down as Zorvani soldiers poured in, weapons drawn, banners unfurled. They marched forward, a wall of muscle, armor, and teeth. The counselors barely had time to react. Screams and blasts of energy filled the hall as security forces fought desperately to hold the line. It was a massacre. Those who had lived in the dream of peace were unprepared for the nightmare's return. Amid the chaos, the supreme commander of the Zorvani, an enormous, battle-scarred being named Zarvok, strode to the center of the chamber. He wore no armor, only the gleaming scars of 1,000 victories. His voice, amplified by the acoustics of the hall, thundered over the din. The era of weakness ends today. The galaxy belongs to those strong enough to seize it. You have cowered under banners of false peace for 1,000 years. Now you will kneel or you will be broken. The surviving counselors cowered behind their ruined desk. representatives of species famed for their wisdom, their science, their art, now trembled like leaves before the hurricane. Many looked to the humans, the unpredictable, dangerous humans, hoping for salvation, or at least for understanding. The human delegation sat in silence. Their uniforms were immaculate, their postures relaxed. They met the Zorvani with unblinking gazes, calm and unshaken. For a long moment the hall held its breath. Then, from the heart of the human group, a sound broke the stillness. A chuckle. Low, warm, almost amused. Another joined it, then another, until the humans were laughing, a deep, genuine, almost joyous laughter that filled the shattered chamber and bounced from the broken walls. The Zorvani, bred for conquest, paused in confusion. Laughter was not the response they expected. Laughter was not fear. Laughter was not submission. It was challenge. It was contempt. Commander Zarvok snarled, taking a step forward. "You dare mock your end?" The lead human delegate rose to her feet, smoothing the creases from her uniform with deliberate casualness. Her insignia glittered under the broken lights, a starburst, ancient symbol of Earth's first steps into the void. She smiled, not kindly, but with a feral edge. "You think this is our end?" she said, voice carrying easily without amplification. "You think we spent 1,000 years singing songs and weaving dreams, while forgetting who we are?" The humans rose as one, an unbroken line of defiance. No weapons in their hands, no armor on their shoulders, yet they radiated an air of violence far greater than any weapon could project. "We honored your peace because we chose to," the delegate continued. "Not because we forgot how to wage war." Zarvok growled, but hesitation flickered behind his eyes. In that moment, the tide shifted, invisible but inevitable. The humans had not been idle dreamers, not passive architects of a soft utopia. They had been lions resting in the sun, never forgetting the taste of blood. The laughter rolled on, a wave crashing against the brittle edifice of Zorvani pride. Across the galaxy, human colonies activated protocols coded into their systems centuries before. Bunkers opened, fleets that had never officially existed launched from hidden shipyards, factories converted overnight from manufacturing goods to building weapons of war. The Zorvani had broken the peace. Humanity would show them what they had truly broken. From the ruins of the council chamber, amid the laughter of mankind, the war for the soul of the galaxy truly began. The first blows fell swift and brutal. The Zorvani, masters of strength and domination, found themselves facing an enemy they could not predict. Human ships did not follow traditional battle patterns. They feigned retreat only to ambush. They abandoned positions that seemed vital, only to strike at supply lines 2 sectors away. They deployed technologies that twisted the very laws of physics, collapsing enemy drives, short-circuiting command networks, unleashing electronic plagues that turned Zorvani warships into drifting tombs. In every engagement, humans fought like madmen, smiling, singing, bleeding without fear. They thought they had seen the extent of humanity's wrath. They thought the first counterstrikes, the crippling of fleets, the loss of entire sectors were the peak of what humans could muster. They were wrong. The laughter that had rolled over the council was only the first note of a symphony of devastation, carefully composed over 1,000 years of preparation, refined by centuries of ancestral memories carried like ancient weapons within human DNA. The Zorvani High Command convened in hidden fortresses, desperate to reframe the war in their favor. Every strategy leaned on overwhelming force, on the hammer blows of superior numbers and battle-hardened soldiers. But humanity did not fight like a hammer. They fought like a swarm of knives, cutting where least expected, bleeding the Zorvani dry in 100 places at once. Every time a fleet was dispatched to reclaim a world, it found itself striking at shadows. Every time a system was retaken, it was poisoned, its resources burned or booby-trapped to make the victory hollow. Humans understood something fundamental that the Zorvani had never grasped. You did not need to defeat your enemy's armies, you needed to defeat their will. and humans knew how to break wills better than any species in the galaxy. The first true turning point came not with a battle, but with a broadcast. Across every frequency, on every screen, the humans unveiled Operation Echoes of Earth. Footage of Zorvani war crimes, doctored propaganda, secret atrocities, some real, some fabricated with terrifying precision, flooded into enemy territory. The Zorvani's own civilians, once unified in belief of inevitable victory, began to question. Whispers of dissent grew into cries of rebellion. Starving worlds, exhausted by a war they were promised would be swift, turned their anger inward. Even then, the Zorvani believed they could endure. After all, they had built empires before. They had crushed rebellions under claw and boot. But they had never faced a species that understood how to weaponize despair itself. Human operatives, known only in fragments of intercepted comms as the Wraiths, moved through occupied space like phantoms. They turned leaders against each other. They sabotaged critical infrastructure. They fanned the flames of every doubt, every fear. Entire garrisons vanished without a trace, their last transmissions filled with panicked screams and the eerie strains of Earth's ancient war songs, broadcast into the blackness. The Zorvani military doctrine was rigid, hierarchical. It had served them for millennia. Against humans, it became a noose tightening around their own neck. When orders came slower than the rate of human adaptation, when top-down commands faltered under electronic assault, chaos spread like a virus through their ranks. In the void between stars, humanity's fleets expanded exponentially. They no longer fought for territory or control, they fought for total eradication. Every victory fed new technologies into their war machine. Every captured world became a forge for new weapons, new ships, new horrors born from the hybridization of human ingenuity and alien science. The Council remnants, those who had once viewed humans with suspicion, now begged to join their crusade. Most were accepted, not out of mercy, but out of cold calculation. An ally today could become a useful tool tomorrow. Within months, entire sectors were purged of Zorvani influence. Planets once fortified beyond comprehension fell to coordinated strikes so precisely timed that not a single Zorvani ship escaped. Human ground forces moved with a brutality that defied even the most savage histories of the galaxy. They were surgical when they needed to be, merciless when they chose to be, and utterly indifferent to concepts of acceptable losses. To them, every battle was a payment made gladly toward a debt owed for 1,000 years of patience. Resistance became suicide. Zorvani commanders began defecting in secret, sending coded messages offering surrender. Some were accepted, only to find themselves disappearing into human custody, their knowledge extracted and their existence erased. Others were publicly executed by their own people, desperate to cling to the last tatters of unity. It did not matter. Humanity had learned long ago that wars were not won by mercy, they were won by inevitability. In the ashes of a dozen worlds, human researchers unlocked new thresholds of biological and cybernetic enhancement. Soldiers returned to the front lines faster, stronger, less human in form but more human in spirit. The Zorvani called them the Revenants, warriors who could not be killed, who rose from battlefield graves to slaughter anew. Fear spread through enemy ranks like wildfire, fed by real encounters and whispered exaggerations until no Zorvani slept without dreaming of metal-eyed monsters dragging them into the dark. The galaxy watched. The galaxy remembered. Empires that had once mocked Earth's primitive savages, now crafted treaties of non-aggression, desperate to avoid drawing the eye of the wrathful Titan that humanity had become. Even amid the slaughter, the humans never lost their laughter. It was a symbol of their invincibility, a constant reminder that they chose this war, embraced its horrors, and relished its storms. Their fleets bore banners not of planets or corporations but of old Earth myths: wolves, dragons, phoenixes, titans, symbols of destruction and rebirth, of predators that ruled by right of nature. As humanity drove deeper into Zorvani space, they uncovered the heart of the Dominion, a world so fortified that even preliminary scans triggered auto-defenses capable of annihilating lesser fleet. The Zorvani had never needed such measures before. They had never feared an enemy who could reach so far. Now they saw the inevitability closing in. Zarvok himself retreated to the Heart World, swearing to make his final stand. He broadcast messages of defiance to his people, invoking ancient oaths of honor, rallying the remnants of his once mighty empire. His words fell on deaf ears. The Zorvani did not lack for courage, they lacked for hope. Hope had been stripped from them as methodically as flesh from bone. When humanity struck the Heart World, it was not with overwhelming force, but with precision so ruthless it defied belief. Cloaked drones infiltrated planetary shield. Viral payloads rewritten at the molecular level collapsed defense networks from within. Shock troops, some fully human, others more machine than flesh, pierced the atmosphere like falling stars, carving corridors of death straight to the throne of the Dominion. Zarvok fought. He fought as only a cornered beast can fight, without thought of victory, only of spite and legacy. His personal guard, the best warriors the Zorvani had ever bred, stood against the tide. They were swept away like sand before a hurricane. When the Supreme Commander fell, it was not to a grand duel or a noble confrontation. It was to a single, precise shot through the skull, delivered from a sniper hidden miles away, fired through a collapsing window of opportunity calculated to the nanosecond. Humanity did not care for ceremony. They cared for result. The fall of the Heart World did not mark the end. It marked the beginning of a reckoning. Humanity issued a simple message to the surviving Zorvani systems. There will be no surrender. There will be no mercy. There will only be memory. And so, the extermination. The final phase of humanity's triumph was not a battle. It was not a war. It was a message sent in 1,000 different forms, across countless worlds, encrypted in such a way that it could never be erased. It was the final step in humanity's cleansing of the galaxy, and it was as deliberate as every action taken before it. The Zorvani were no more. Their remnants were gone, wiped from existence as if they had never been. But humanity understood that the war was not just against the Zorvani. It was against the very idea that a species could believe itself invincible, that a species could grow so powerful it forgot the value of life beyond its own borders. The war had been about erasing that arrogance, about reminding the galaxy that even the most unassuming of creatures could rise to unimaginable height, and that when they did, the galaxy would have no choice but to remember. After the fall of Zarvok, after the collapse of the Dominion, the galaxy stood in stunned silence. No species dared question what had transpired. It was the kind of silence that followed a storm, the kind where the air was thick with the lingering pressure of what had just occurred. The Zorvani had fallen, not because they were outmatched in battle, but because they were incapable of understanding the nature of their enemies. The destruction of the Zorvani Empire was swift, but the repercussions were far-reaching. It wasn't just the fall of a single species. It was the unraveling of a belief system that had sustained the galaxy for millennia. The Zorvani had convinced themselves that their superiority was inevitable. They had built an empire that spanned the stars, believing their mastery over technology, strategy, and biology made them unassailable. And yet, humanity had shattered that myth. The Zorvani had never understood the nature of human resilience. They had underestimated the depth of human ambition and the lengths to which they would go to protect their future. They had thought humanity was just another species, another fleeting civilization that would rise and fall like the others before it. But humans were not like the others. They never had been. What followed the war was not an era of peace. It was an era of change. The stars were never the same after that day. No empire would rise unchecked again. The galaxy would no longer be governed by fear of destruction alone, but by respect for strength, for intelligence, and for the unbreakable will that humanity had demonstrated. Every corner of the galaxy would remember the price of underestimating humanity. The old alliances that had once dictated the balance of power began to shift. The once mighty empires now found themselves reassessing their positions. The other species that had looked on as passive observers during the war now began to recognize the power dynamic had irreversibly shifted. They saw what had been done to the Zorvani, and they knew that if they were next, there would be no mercy. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer to be trifled with. No single species could ever challenge humanity directly, not now, not after everything they had endured and overcome. The galaxy learned to adapt, to accommodate the new power that had arisen from the ashes. Every fleet that once considered itself above the fray now found its future uncertain. New alliances were forged, but none were with any illusion of equality. The human hand, though not always visible, was in every corner of the galaxy, pushing the narrative forward, ensuring their future was secure. But humanity did not seek to rule the galaxy. They didn't need to. Their dominance was not based on conquest. It was based on the understanding that they were the ones who had made the ultimate sacrifice. The others might not have understood the depths of the destruction that had taken place, but they knew one thing for certain. Humanity would never allow the rise of another empire like the Zorvani. Ever again. In the wake of victory, the Earth Confederation did not celebrate. There were no parades, no grand speeches. The war had taken too much. Too many had been lost. Humanity's collective soul had been scarred, and the cost was clear. For all the victories won, there was no true joy in the destruction of a civilization, even one as cruel as the Zorvani. Yet there was no regret. None at all. The future had been secured. Humanity had learned that peace, real peace, could only be attained when every weapon was at their disposal, when every adversary knew that if they chose to challenge Earth, they would face the full wrath of what had been unleashed. The galaxy would never forget the brutal lesson. Those who had underestimated humanity would never make the same mistake again. Yet even as the last Zorvani warships were dismantled and the last traces of their empire were wiped clean from the stars, humanity turned its gaze inward. The cost of war, of unrelenting destruction, had taken its toll. The humans who had fought and survived were left to rebuild, not just their homes, but their very identities. How could a species so defined by its past as conquerors and survivors move forward without becoming something else? What came next, when there was nothing left to fight? The answer was found not in the stars, but in the quiet moments of reflection. Humanity was not defined by the wars it fought, but by the lessons it had learned. The scars would remain, but they would not be the defining marks of their civilization. Instead, it was their ability to rise from those scars, to continue forward, and to build a future not based on revenge, but on resilience that defined them. That, above all else, was their true strength. In the end, the galaxy would remember humanity not for the wars they fought, but for the peace they had earned. The peace that was never given. The peace that was fought for, bled for, and ultimately made unbreakable through sacrifice, determination, and a relentless will to survive. And the galaxy would never forget the last words spoken by humanity, words etched into the very fabric of the universe itself. Never forget. Never forgive. We are the last generation to know true peace. But we will never allow the stars to forget the price it took. The galaxy was not at peace because they chose it. It was at peace because humanity had decided, long ago, that they would never let anything challenge that peace again. The stars were theirs, and no one would ever take them from them. The Zorvani were gone, their empire erased, but humanity's legacy was eternal. As long as the stars shone, the memory of their triumph would never fade.